Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. I'm glad to see that everybody's here. Not. I'm going to preach tonight from Ecclesiastes. I'm going to read a little something before I get started. Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, who was King David's son. And what I'm going to be going over tonight is when he was later in his life, so he had experienced a lot of things. He was blessed by God because when God came to him and asked him what he wanted, he told God he wanted wisdom so he could rule over the people. So God was so impressed that he over and abundantly blessed him with more than just wisdom. There are a few experiences in life that are more universal than disappointment. It seems as if everyone has experienced a broken promise, an unfulfilled expectation, or a shattered belief. The teacher in the book of Ecclesiastes recorded his own experiences with disappointment as he tried to find peace apart from God. The teacher uses a series of examples: wealth, wisdom, popularity, pleasure, and shows how each of them ultimately ends in disappointment. If it becomes the sole reason for one's existence, after pondering this for several chapters, the author finally offers his conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. It appears that the teacher abandoned any hope in worldly pursuits and decided that glorifying God provides the only lasting meaning in life. So I'll be giving examples of some of those things that he experienced and how they didn't bring him any happiness or fulfillment, because I know a lot of us think if we had that big house, we'd be happy, or if we had that lottery winning, we'd be happy, or if we had a hotter wife or husband, we'd be happy. If we drove a better car, we'd be happy, but they're all just things that can be replaced, things that over time age and become not new and shiny anymore. And God is the only thing that's consistent. He who was, he who is, and he who is forevermore. So, we're going to start with Ecclesiastes 1, 2 through 8. And I'm going to read that right now. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher, completely meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. The sun rises and the sun sets, then hurries around to rise again. The wind blows south and then turns north. Around and around it goes, blowing in circles. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. That's like us. No matter what we get, we're never full unless we turn it over to God. Then the water returns again to the rivers and flows out again to the sea. So he's repeating us. He's telling us that things go in a cycle. And no matter what that cycle is, it's repetitive. That's why putting God first is so important. Because when you focus on God and go according to his will, then it's not a repetition anymore, because it's not just something you're just going through and experiencing day after day after day. In Ecclesiastes 1:15 and 18. What is wrong cannot be made right. What is missing cannot be recovered. The greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. To increase knowledge only increases sorrow. So there are people out there also who will go to all kinds of classes and college for years, and they got all kind of degrees on the wall and all kind of accolades, and they're the best at this and they know all of that, and they're the top researcher on this subject or that subject, but none of it matters if it's not based or focused with God in the front of it. None of that brings fulfillment. None of it can fully fill you with any type of happiness or accomplishment, as if when you turn to God and allow Him to fill you and Him to lead you so that you can follow His path and feel the fulfillment and the joy and the peace. Knowledge didn't bring him happiness. Everything was repetition. The smarter he got, the more he realized that nothing mattered. Everything was meaningless. Watching the sun come up each day was meaningless. Watching the river flow into the sea was meaningless. Can you imagine sitting and watching water flow, a big river flowing into an ocean, but the ocean is never rising? The ocean is never getting full. It's never getting any bigger. It's never changing. It's just the same thing over and over and over. So no matter what he did or what he experienced, it didn't fulfill what was empty inside of his soul or his spirit. All of these things were outward things. All of these things were earthly things. Knowledge you accumulate is mostly knowledge on what's going on in the world. Unless you're reading his word, then you can get revelation and get knowledge that's spiritual and that's filling. Ecclesiastes 2:1-11. I said to myself, come on, let's try pleasure. Let's look for the good things in life. But I found that this, too, was meaningless. So I said, laughter is silly. What good does it do to seek pleasure? After much thought, I decided to cheer myself with wine. And while still seeking wisdom, I clutched at foolishness. In this way, I tried to experience the only happiness most people find during their brief life in this world. I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect the water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the kings who had lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. So I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. So now he's telling you, look, I drank, I entertained myself, I had worldly pleasures with people, and I'm sure we can all relate. We've all been young. We all were not born into the Fire of God ministry, and we've been outside of church, we've been outside of God, we've done things, and we're here. So obviously none of those things kept us fulfilled or kept our attention out there, because we sought something else and we were all led here. So no matter what he did, if he had Whitney Houston singing for him, or if he had Luther Vandross singing for him, or if he had I don't know, some beautiful lady that you could think of, some beautiful actress laying in his bed, it didn't matter. It didn't fulfill him. Everything was temporary, again, because it's worldly, earthly things that he's experiencing. It's not spiritual things. It's not God-led things. It's not anything that will feed you as God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus would do. These are all things that are fleeting. They're moments. When you're doing these things, drinking wine, you might get a headache. You got to go to the bathroom a bunch of times. You might feel dizzy. You might even get sick and vomit. I mean, is that pleasurable? I wouldn't think so. But, he tried it to see if it would bring him happiness and if it would bring him fulfillment, and none of it did. So far, he's got all this wisdom. He's experiencing all these things in life that everyone in the world thinks This is what would fulfill me. This is what would make me happy. This is what I'm missing. This is what I need. And none of it's true. We need his word. We do need spiritual wisdom. And we could use earthly wisdom to know the things that we should avoid, that, we don't need to drink for happiness. We don't need to go out and smoke or something for happiness. We don't need to go and steal or do something to make our adrenaline flow and think that, oh, that was great. I think I can do that all the time, because nothing you do repeatedly will have the same effect. Ecclesiastes 2:12 through 17. Let's see. So I decided to compare wisdom with foolishness and madness. For who can do this better than I, the king? I thought, wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. For the wise can see where they are going, but fools walk in the dark. Yet I saw that the wise and the foolish share the same fate. Both will die. So I said to myself, since I will end up the same as the fool, what's the value of all my wisdom? This is all so meaningless. For the wise and the foolish both die. The wise will not be remembered any longer than the fool. In the days to come, both will be forgotten. So the guy that you see walking down the street, that you're like, look at that dude, he's crazy. He's homeless. He looks dirty. Those people, you'll remember him for him being dirty and homeless and looking the way he does, just as much as you will remember Albert Einstein, because it doesn't matter. Things that Albert Einstein did or created, it led to other things, but what he's done is so obsolete by now that it doesn't matter. So what he's saying here is, even though he's so wise, he's not going to be remembered or held any higher necessarily when he's dead than someone who was not as known or as popular or as wise as he was. So again, he's finding these things meaningless. Again, it's a worldly thing. His wisdom, if it's of God and he's putting God first, it will make a difference, because this word right here has gone on for generations and will go on for generations. So if your name and your deeds are mentioned in here, it will not be forgotten. But to be some scholar who has all these awards or all these, forget the word. What do you get when you graduate, Degrees, thank you. Okay, you guys are awake. Okay, so all the degrees and accolades and all that, it's great on your wall. It's like if you got a Van Gogh and you put it on your wall, nobody knows you have it until they come over, and still you got to tell them, this is a Van Gogh. And they're like, oh, who's that? So it doesn't matter at all. Ecclesiastes 3:1 through 11. For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do people really get for all their hard work? I have seen the burden God has placed on us all. Yet, God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So God is the only one that knows us before we were created, and he already knows where we're going to end up. We have no idea day to day what we're doing most of the time, let alone for a lifespan. Pastors preach a lot about seasons, and when you're in certain seasons that they begin and they end. Some are good, some are bad. Some we welcome, some we try to run from. This is my season for preaching. I didn't want it. I answered it. I would have ran from it. But, I always think of Sue when she went to the gas station to make a phone call so God wouldn't hear it because she was at the church at the time and didn't want to make the phone call at the church. And I know that's not possible. No matter where you go, he's going to hear it. So no matter where I run, he's going to find me. He's going to seek me out. Or he'll just replace me, and I don't want to be replaced. But just like in the fields or in a garden, you can know when to plant your seed. You have to know when to water. You have to know how to nurture it. You have to know how to cut away the suckers, thanks to Deacon Daniel. You got to know how to tend things and when it's time to do things and when it's not time to do things. Otherwise, you'll just plant a seed and either it won't grow or you'll kill it. Every season is something that we can't avoid. Seasons change during the year. Autumn, winter, spring, fall, summer. You can't stop it from happening. You hopefully have warm clothes for the winter and cool clothes for the summer. You know how to stay maybe indoors for the winter where it's warm and that you need to go swimming or find a cool spot to hang out when it's hot. Either way, you have to deal with the changing seasons or changing events of each and every day in your life. And when God is leading you, it's a lot easier than when you're trying to do it on your own. Because when you try to do it on your own, maybe you end up at a place where the air conditioner is broken on a 110-degree day. And then that wasn't the right place to go. Or maybe you go somewhere where the heater is busted or the gas is leaking when it's cold outside. And again, that's not the place to go. But if God is leading you, he's going to lead you where you need to be or to the person that will take you where you need to be. Being led here, we're lucky to be under Pastor Steve, who leads us and gives us direction, whether we want it or not. Sometimes we take it as a negative, and sometimes we embrace it. Of course, we embrace it when it's something that we want, and we kind of try to push it away when it's something that we don't. But it's still a season that we have to go through. Once he sees that you're through your season where he doesn't have to do that for you anymore, then he won't. And then you can grow and be the person that God is leading you to be. And he will be there if you ask for his assistance instead of just giving you his assistance. Ecclesiastes 3:16 through 19. I also noticed that under the sun there is evil in the courtroom. Yes, even the courts of law are corrupt. I said to myself, in due season God will judge everyone, both good and bad, for all their deeds. I also thought about the human condition, how God proves to people that they are like animals. For people and animals share the same fate. Both breathe and both must die. So people have no real advantage over the animals. How meaningless. So I know as I was growing up, I grew up in Antioch. I don't know if many people know of Antioch, but when I was younger, it was a redneck town. So I was very shunned out there. But it was surprising to me how many times the police would pull me over to search me for drugs or weapons or what have you, just because I was black. So as I grew up, I saw an injustice with the police system, with the court system, because when I'd go to court to fight whatever made-up ticket they would make up saying, oh, well, you did this or that, and write me a ticket, when I'm like, that's not what you said in the beginning, but because he stopped to harass me, he had to put something on me. So when I'd go to court and plead not guilty, it would be my word against the cop's word. And unfortunately, the judge also would be white, and I would be found guilty, whether I did something wrong or not. So I can relate to him saying how the courts are also corrupt. We hear about it all the time. You hear about, I don't mean to just say Black lives matter, all lives matter, but you hear about it specifically when it's that situation because it happens so often. It's amazing to me that sometimes when it's not a person of color or Hispanic descent, they may have gotten shot or detained, but that's it. When it's Hispanic or Black descent, they're all of a sudden dead, shot 31 times, and, oh, we thought the cell phone was a weapon. Sorry. So there's corruption in the court, and it even goes back to Solomon's days, way back when. And it's been a cycle, something that's repeated itself. Ecclesiastes 4, 1 through 6. Again, I observed all the oppression that takes place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed with no one to comfort them. The oppressors have great power, and their victims are helpless. So I concluded that the dead are better off than the living, but most fortunate of all are those who are not yet born, for they have not seen all the evil that is done under the sun. Then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors, but this, too, is meaningless, like chasing the wind. That's funny at the end how he says chasing the wind, because the wind blows, but you don't know where it's coming from, and you don't know where it's going to. But yet and still, you know the wind, you feel the wind. There's a story that one time the wind and the sun were going to make a bet, and there was a man walking with a trench coat, and the wind said, I bet you I could make him take his coat off. And the sun said, okay. And so the wind blew, and it blew, and it blew. And the harder the wind blew, the more the man grabbed for his trench coat to cover, to protect himself. And after blowing and blowing and blowing, the man never let go of his trench coat. So then the sun said, okay, it's my turn. And the sun shined bright. And the warmer it got, the man took off his trench coat. So sometimes when we try to make things happen of our own accord, we're doing the opposite. We're making things harder for ourselves. We're making things more difficult. Whereas if we just let things go according to the flow of God, like the sun shines, well, then things happen in the natural. We don't always understand it. We don't always get it, because it's like we didn't execute it. We knew the outcome, but we didn't know that it would happen the way it happened. But that's when you're letting God's will be done, and it's done in a way that you don't always understand, because we don't understand his understanding. We don't think like he thinks. We don't see what he sees. We just try to emulate him the best we can. Even though we're made in his image, we still are not worthy. Ecclesiastes 4, 7 through 16. I'm reading all these because they're different situations. Each one has a different meaning. Each one is a different experience for Solomon, but it still relates to today. So that's why I keep pulling up more verses to read about his experiences and comparing them to some that are my own personal, or some that might be popping into your own mind right now. So 4, 7 through 16. I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. This is the case of a man who is all alone, without a child or a brother, yet who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. But then he asks himself, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It is all so meaningless and depressing. Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated. but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. It is better to be a poor but wise youth than an old and foolish king who refuses all advice. Such a youth could rise from poverty and succeed. He might even become king, though he has been in prison. But then everyone rushes to the side of yet another youth who replaces him. Endless crowds stand around him, but then another generation grows up and rejects him too. So it is all meaningless, like chasing the wind. Again, he mentions chasing the wind, grabbing at air, doing things that are unfulfilling, doing things that will bring you, they won't complete you, they won't fill you, they won't make you happy. For me, when he says two people are better off than one, more than likely they're talking husband and wife. But for someone who's single right now, I would say God would be my second person, because with him I can do all things. So even though I don't have someone to stand back to back with, God goes before me and he watches behind me. He guards me from all things, seen and unseen. So for me, he would be my second person. When it says three, I'll never forget when Elder Jeremiah and Janina got married, and he was telling me that they were having a discussion, and it was something that I guess you could say he didn't agree with. And I said, so what are you going to do? He said, that's God's wife. So it was three. It was Elder Jeremiah, Elder Janina, and God. That was unbreakable. I always remember that when he said that, because it was different for me. I had never heard anyone speak like that before and say, oh, well, I'm going to let God take care of her. Instead of him getting into an argument with her and making a bad situation worse, he just let go. And God corrected her on his own to where, she came and said, I was wrong, which is also a big deal because, you women, you don't do those kind of things. But when God is involved, it happens. Also, like I said, things that are new, there's a new king right now. Everybody supports that king. But once things aren't going the way they want, the crops didn't grow, the taxes are too high, they want to promote a new king. There's a new younger guy who's wiser, who's better, who's stronger. Let's select him and put him in. And now this younger generation supports that guy, and out with the old and in with the new. So it's like chasing the wind, because everything's a cycle, but it's still meaningless because you still got people who are happy and you still got people who are unhappy. But again, once you put God first, you can withstand the season of unhappiness with joy and peace in your heart following him. And in that sense, you don't suffer like the other people who don't have that joy and peace within them. Like in the Bible where it says, those who follow me will not do without. You'll have, even if there's a drought, even if there's a sickness, his people will not be affected. So if you believe in Jesus, you spend your time praying, you communicate with them, you read his word, you'll be one of his people. And even in a time like right now with the coronavirus, I know there's a few people in our church who had it, nobody died. I don't think anybody was hospitalized, and we're all here healthy, and so is our family. So when you think about that, it's not because we're special. It's not because we've been vaccinated. It's because we're under the umbrella of good pastors, and we all are connected with God. We all are doing our best to follow God, follow his word, and do what's expected of us each and every day. None of us are perfect. There's times where I wake up and I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm tired today. I really don't want to pray at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I know the last time I didn't pray and I went to work, it was the worst day of my life. So even if I wake up and only pray for 35, 45 minutes, I get that prayer in for sure each and every morning before I go to work. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. And people at work notice it too, because the day I had a bad day, I was having a bad day. It wasn't that people around me were having a bad day. I was having a bad day because I didn't have his peace. I didn't have his joy. I didn't have his protection. So I reacted to everything. And people started asking, what's wrong with you? And that's when I think I told the young lady, said to me, well, don't you pray to God? And I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't today. So what we do is important. What we show to others is important. When we obey and we follow, it's not just for our sakes, it's for those around us. It's for the family under us. It's for the person watching you to see how you do, that they can follow. I look forward to seeing Elder Joseph here on Saturdays and Sundays. If he wasn't here, I would probably be like, what happened to Elder Joseph? Because him being here consistently helps me to be here consistently. If he can do it, then I know I can do it. I know when I'm praying sometimes, like we hear Elder Jeremiah lead prayer a lot, and he goes in. He goes in, and sometimes he's moving because he just can't contain it. So sometimes in the morning when I'm praying and I'm feeling tired, I'll literally say in my head, Elder Jeremiah is killing it right now praying. You better speed it up. You better get it going. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I start going too because I know he's putting his time in. And I know I got to put my time in. I know Pastor Steve is putting his time in and reading and praying because I know Pastor Eugene ain't going to let him slack. So I know he's getting his in for sure. But it helps me. When I think like that, it's like, okay, tired or not, there's obligations and things you have to do to be obedient. We can't just say, oh, yeah, I go to church Sunday and I know God's real and I pray sometimes and sometimes I'll look at my Bible and I don't know, I might read a paragraph or two. In some situations, that might be acceptable if you have grace, but in the long run, that's not gonna fly. Pastor Steve says all the time, you can come to church, you can give your tithes, you can holy dance, you can speak in tongue, and you can still fall, you can still fail. If someone like Pastor Kim Young-do can fall from as high as he is, from as much time as he's put in, none of us have come close to what he's done. So it's so much easier for us to fall. If you think about it, it's like he's on cement. He's pretty stable. We're barely on sticks. We haven't even established a level playing field yet to stand on. But as long as we keep working and moving forward, it will come. We will too be raised up. We will too be blessed. And we will too get to a point to where it will be easier to fall, but it'll be harder to be tempted to fall because we know where our strength comes from. We know who protects us. We know who we represent. Once we get that in us, then it's easier sometimes for us to pass certain tests. It's easier for us to do certain things. Just don't chase the wind. Don't sit here and think, oh, I can't wait to be blessed and get more money, to get a better job, to have a nicer car. Those are material things. Come here to get closer to the Lord. Come here to learn wisdom. Come here to share fellowship. Come here to encourage others, to help others, to lift others up, to love others. And I don't mean that in a funny way. I mean that seriously. I love Youth Pastor Jason, his enthusiasm, his energy, his freeness, the way he dances, the way he does whatever he wants to do, and he's not ashamed, he's not embarrassed, and it doesn't bother him. I hope and pray that one day I'll get to that point to where I can get up here and just shake my butt, and I don't care if you laugh or not. That's what I feel, and that's what I'm going to do, and it's all for God. Ecclesiastes 12:13. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, For this is everyone's duty. Period. It's everyone's duty to obey his commands. Now, we're blessed that we're not under the law, because I wouldn't be able to stand up here right now if we were under the law. That's for sure. My bells would have been stopped ringing and you would have been pulling me off from a rope long time ago. But because Jesus gave his life for us and we received grace and a new covenant to where we're forgiven, that's what enables me to stand up here right now and preach and speak this word, even though I know I'm a sinner, even though I know I have a lot of growing to do, a lot of improving to do. I have a lot of sacrificing to do. I have a lot more dying to do, a lot more cross-bearing to do. It's not easy, and I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I want to do it. A part of me wants to do it, but there's a big fleshly part that does not want to do it. There's a big part of me that says I can't do it. But again, all things are possible through Christ Jesus. All of this was, Pastor Steve had texted me earlier today. Now, during this week, I tried hard to find something to come up here and say and preach about, and nothing was working. I watched a bunch of Stephen Furtick, I watched Joseph Prince, I watched Joel Osteen, and nothing was clicking, nothing was making any sense, nothing was being absorbed. I tried reading, and I'd get through a few pages, and I couldn't remember what I read, and nothing was clicking. So he sent me a text today, you got an outline for what you're going to preach on? And I texted him back, nope. And the Bible verse of the day was how two people are stronger than one. And I had read it early in the morning when I woke up to pray, and I had read it in the morning when I woke up for the second time, but it wasn't clicking. But after, for some reason, I sent him nope, it popped up again, and I read it, and it led me to Ecclesiastes. And then the things that Solomon spoke about, it clicked. Because as hard as I was trying to do it, instead of being led, I was trying to make up what I was going to do. I was trying to say, oh, I know something's going to click, and that's going to be what I'm going to do. But not until the last minute did he give me the peace and the wisdom to say, this is what you're going to do. And that's when I said, oh, I got it, Pastor. I'm going to do Ecclesiastes, Chasing the Wind. So before I got that Bible verse, I had already written a poem, and it's funny that some of the things that I had wrote in the poem were kind of some of the things that were talked about by Solomon. So maybe that's why he led me there. I'm not sure. So let me see. I'm going to put the... All right. Put the poem up. I hope you guys aren't sleeping, because it's awfully quiet out there. I ain't got like an amen, all right, or nothing, just like crickets out there. Golly. All right. We live with depression, being sad each and every day. We live in oppression, living for others and their way. We accept compression, not wanting to surpass what others may think or say. We give out suppression. This is good enough. Everything is okay. We feel these things in life, and we know it in our spirit, yet we won't pray or read his word. We don't want to hear it. This world, our flesh, and all of our idols, we must give him our best, not strive for titles. Please him, not them. They will let you down. If you stop and look back, God has always been around. We don't see it. In the moment, we are blind, fulfilling expectations of others, still being left behind. People, rise up, raise your fists. We are his. He is in us. Overcome, move forward, for we represent Jesus. Amen.